Warning: before viewing this presentation, please note that T.S. Eliot said, "Various critics have done me the honor to interpret the poem in terms of criticism of the contemporary world, have considered it, indeed, as an important bit of social criticism. To me, it was only the relief of a personal and wholly insignificant grouse against life. It is just a piece of rhythmical rumbling."
Throughout The Wasteland, there is a sense that the speaker feels that society is decaying, particularly when it comes to morals. T.S. Eliot points out several times that people do not live anymore, they just exist. There is a loss of convictions, and people appear to be content with sitting idly by, letting things occur. Eliot also alludes to how there has been a shift from being concerned about society to being concerned about one's own self. The presence of death is also seen in each section. In relation to Eliot's quote on The Wasteland, this poem was not intended to be read by the general public. Rather, it was geared towards a scholarly audience. The Wasteland has no plot, and there really isn't a form. The whole poem is broken up into 5 sections, and each has its own idea, but at the same time relates to the central theme. The entire poem is disorganized, representing how the idea is unclear.
The history of The Wasteland is written in 1922 after World War I and the Flapper era. It is part of the modernist movement because Eliot is often described as the embodiment of the modernist movement. Many writers are disillusioned, and it is characterized by dramatic experiences and deliberate break from conventions such as plot, punctuation, and style. It is also characterized with ambiguous narration, psychological investigation, and self-awareness.
Characteristics of an epic. The first is a majestic theme at a universal level. Eliot follows this by criticizing society as a whole. He urges everyone of every status and situation to evoke change and search for meaning in life. The second is taken from history, religion, and legend, and relates to the people's conscience. For the history, it has many lines alluding to past works. For example, Shakespeare's tragedies and Dante's Inferno. He draws upon these stories' messages to aid his own. In relation to people's conscience, there's very little dialogue in the story, and most action happens within the character's mind. Also, supernatural elements dominate the plot. This is not applicable to The Wasteland. The only mystical occurrence is in the burial of the dead, where a psychic does a tarot reading that becomes true in later sections. Another characteristic is action is huge in scale and characters are mighty heroes. This is not applicable. Except for what Thunder said, there is no action. Everything discussed has already occurred and is used as an example of what life should not be. And also the characters are not heroes or mighty. They are everyday people and generally miserable. Another characteristic is a mighty effort to carry out some great just purpose against powerful forces destined to be defeated. Eliot, through the speakers, is violently attempting to get society to reevaluate its ideals and change for the better. However, he believes that it is too late and that the struggle will not end well. Another characteristic is deep elemental passions are set forth through the plot. The characters do not exhibit such passions. However, we do see a passion within Eliot's words. He firmly believes his message and wants to evoke such feelings in his audience. Another characteristic is the morale being buried within the story rather than spelled out. This is very true in The Wasteland. Eliot is a complex writer. His numerous references and intertwining stories combine for a deep theme that is not clear in a superficial interpretation. Another is characters play a role in furthering or hindering the plot, but do not have strong personalities. Eliot uses these characters in his theme, but they are completely static and morally ambiguous. We do not even see the characters long enough to witness their distinct personalities. Lastly, that the actions fall into distinct episodes and form into books. The Wasteland is broken into 5 sections, and each have their own distinct subjects and characters. However, they relate to the central theme.
The Burial of the Dead is the first section of The Wasteland. It is broken up into 4 parts, and each has a different speaker. Each of the parts represents the common theme that the way to life is through death itself, and although suffering can be painful, it always awakens new life. Spring is described as being a cruel time because it awakens pain that the dark months of winter kept frozen. However, this section describes that the more one forgets about their sufferings and sorrows, the more meaningless their life is. It is shown that without faith in something whether it be good or bad, one's life is meaningless. It is implied that one who thinks of nothing and does nothing is just as good as someone who is dead and buried. The mention of tarot cards in this section also hints at the events of the rest of the poem, while implying that fate is not something that can be altered and that everyone needs to learn to accept life as it comes.
Eliot describes a man and wife sitting together. They live in an extravagant home, but they are not happy. They sit in an uncomfortable silence until the man awkwardly attempts conversation. The woman is too lost in her thoughts to be much company. She is in mourning. Her life is full of misery. She has an unfaithful, demanding husband, a loveless marriage, and a loss of beauty due to aging. She also recently aborted a child. This section, aptly named A Game of Chess, demonstrates how everyone is a pawn to society. The woman described lacks love and respect because she chose conformity. Her society, personified by the husband, demands beauty and obedience. It is materialistic and moralist. Through this example, Eliot bashes society for its ideals.
In the fire sermon, the third and longest section, the speaker is Tiresias, who is described as neither male or female. He is physically blind, can see everything that happens in the future. He does not do anything or hope for anything. He accepts the world's fate. At the end, he is replaced by St. Augustine, who repeats one word, burning, which shows the theme of a hopeless end and nothing that can be done to stop it.
The speaker of Death by Water describes death of the ocean sailor. This man lived life on the edge, doing whatever he could to get ahead financially. However, he died young, and whatever he had gained is lost. He now rests at the bottom of the ocean, the tide and wildlife quietly cleaning his bones. This is a cautionary tale. Eliot is telling us not to waste our time on meaningless goals. This young man is an example of just how fragile life is. Everything he worked for, money and thrill, is now meaningless and forgotten. We must make something of ourselves and the world before it is.
In this section of The Wasteland, the speaker laments about how society isn't getting any better. The first few sections consist of considering what would happen if there wasn't any water. Here, water is symbolic of hope that things will change. Then the speaker switches to looking at cities falling apart, and then how everything has become opposite of what is expected, such as towers being upside down in the air and bats having baby faces. The speaker then has three people asking questions of the world, and the answers tell the audience that through almsgiving, sympathy, and self-control, change will be brought about. In this section too, the idea of having faith in something is seen, that one should hold on to an idea, a belief, or something, rather than just allowing life to happen. Unlike in other sections of The Wasteland, Eliot barely uses any punctuation, and the lines all seem to be one long string of an idea. This represents the speaker's feeling of the world spiraling out of control, right up until it ends. In the very end of this section, Eliot breaks the lines up into very short sentences, suggesting perhaps that the end will be harsh.